Tonight, we talk about faith and science and New Eden. And of course, the Delta Quadrant. The Star Trek Discovery after show starts now.
You're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Yes, it only felt like an appropriate moment, musical moment here to be keeping the faith. Welcome to the Star Trek Discovery after show. For those of you watching on YouTube, you will again note that it says Star Trek Weekly. For the last 2 weeks, we've been weekly, though, so we're not lying.
No.
But this is the Star Trek Discovery After Show. I'm Christian Bladt, joined once again by Flobo Boyce.
How's it going, everybody? Let's do this.
And Frank Moran on the far end, at the helm, I guess.
Sure, yes. I'm
The opposite end of here, you are at the helm right now. And Flobo's a science officer this week.
That's true. Christian, I know before we hop into everything else, you did ask me just before we hopped on, because there was a comment from last week about exactly when everything is set.
Yes, the timeline. Yes, very important.
And I just did a quick double check just to make sure, and it looks like the person in the chat is correct. The Cage happens 13 years before the original series. Discovery happens 10 years before the original series.
So the Cage actually happened 3 years
before
what we see now. Oh, that's fascinating because see, we're learning things all the time. I really thought that was going to be a couple more years after this, but well, it explains why we don't have our favorite turtleneck uniforms. Well, we are learning everything, and we learned a lot with this week's episode. Welcome to everybody in the chat. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for staying up late. Whether you're on the West Coast or the East Coast, it is a little bit late, so we always appreciate it. That's right. We always appreciate that. Let's start off big picture. Flobo, your thoughts, just overall impressions on this episode?
I'm really getting to the groove of season 2. I'm liking it. I like the idea of what the major mystery is and the sub-mysteries. There is some work to be done, though, between character and story, but I'm willing to hold on tight and see what's going on.
Frank?
This, I think, so far of all the Discovery episodes, felt so much more similar to the original series, but shot with a much better production value.
My goodness,
yes.
Yeah.
So, just one of my favorite shots was just when they first teleport down to the planet. Just a nice camera pulling back, and you see it happening in the distance. Just really some really nice cinematography on that.
And I like to, when I do a show like this, I like to get some Easter eggs and tidbits and things. These come from the website Den of Geek, who pointed out this is only the second episode of Star Trek Discovery where there was an away mission. The other one was the one where Saru communicates with it wasn't spores, but it was there was a life form that sort of overpowered him, and he began behaving very much unlike himself. It had a Latin title, the episode, and I'm not going to try and say it.
Come on, man, what's up?
Vini Vidi Vici. No, I forget what I don't have it in front of me. And I was just like, that's fascinating. This is only the second time that they've beamed down for an away mission. And in the true spirit of the original series, of course, the captain beams down.
Of course.
That's what I need. I need a captain who beams down on the away mission. So for that reason, I certainly agree with you, though. I thought it definitely had that kind of feeling. And as with so many away missions, there's a problem communicating with the ship. Because if they can be beamed up at any time, it usually eats into the efficacy of what the conflict is. Right. So I appreciated that. Yes, sir.
One thing even closer to just the original, it's like a 42-minute episode.
Yes, I did notice it.
Yeah, very lean and mean.
Last week was an hour and 1 minute, and this week was, I think, 44.
Chop.
Yeah, so, it's... I don't know. I mean, it was like that. The runtimes were very inconsistent last year. There were plenty of times where it was closer to an hour, and there were times it was around 45 minutes. So I think we're going to see a lot of that. I think some weeks we're going to get this, and I don't know that this story needed any more time.
No, that's right. I think it took the amount of time it needed. I think if you would have tried to pad it out more, we could have then sat here and complained about some pacing issues or extraneous scenes. So,
But pacing issues is not the forte of this episode's director, one and only Mr. Jonathan Frakes.
That's right.
Commander Riker himself. Obviously there aren't really any touches that, if LeVar Burton had directed this episode, I think it would have looked exactly the same. Just saying. But it's always nice to see the familiar names because you can't see the familiar faces. But I'm glad that Discovery it keeps that revolving door open. So let's kind of go through this chronologically. We start off hearing, but once again not seeing. We're hearing from Spock that he was able to map out these red signals months before they were visible to anyone else. But during this conversation where Burnham is concerned for Spock, we do find out that I believe the politically correct term is the loony bin, or the psychiatric unit on Starbase 5, which is an interesting revelation. We've certainly seen different periods in Spock's life when he's struggled. Most noticeably would probably be Star Trek: The Motion Picture when he first comes aboard. What do you think, Frank? Sort of this revelation that just how serious Spock's struggles are at this time.
I don't know how. I mean, I guess I got to just see how it plays out to the end of the season, because I could imagine people that are really just Spock loyalists to what Roddenberry had set up, to see something like that and go like, "What is happening?"
Yeah.
I right now I have no feeling either way. I'd rather just in terms of how they're going to handle Spock and his journey this season. I'll wait till the end of the season to kind of see what their landing point is.
Yeah, I think that they have a possibility to really run that to the ground, and I'm glad that they spent a very small, finite time on the whole Spock thing before moving on. But I really feel like there's an opportunity there to get really back into the essence of things. I'm kind of with Frank here. I feel like that's a bit of a well they can go too often with, but I'm glad it was only a small slice.
Yeah, I think it's going to be sprinkled through this first batch of episodes. And look, we know we're going to see Spock at some point because he was cast. We talked about last week. Ethan Peck, Gregory Peck's grandson. So I'm looking forward to seeing how they handle him and how he interacts with this sibling that we never knew he had. And Frank, do you think we'll see Cybok as well? Is it going to be a real family reunion?
I honestly would truly love that, because it would just give all those Star Trek 5 haters just like, no, he exists.
Well,
we can't ignore him.
When you consider the religious overtones of this week's episode, maybe we're not too far off from Cybok and Star Trek 5.
But I also feel like it can't end well between the two of them, because Spock never mentions her ever again.
Yeah.
So, and we know that because we've seen all the films, we've seen all the movies, all the various series that he's appeared in. Never once mentioned her. So I feel like you can't say like, and we're best friends
and to
again.
be fair, he never talked about Cybok either. Right.
True.
So it's he wanted to be an only child, but Sarek and Amanda just weren't having it. So I think it'll be interesting to see. What did you think, Frank, about the fact that this storyline brought us to the Beta Quadrant? A little bit out of the realm of where we're expected now. When they first said it, I'm going to admit that I thought they said the Delta Quadrant, which is where they go in Voyager, and that's really far away. But the idea that's like, it's going to take us 150 years to get there. And hey, let's dust off the spore drive. I have to admit, for me personally, I was just a little surprised at how casually they're like, yeah, we'll just use this thing that one Starfleet doesn't want us to do. And last time we checked, wasn't it going to kill Stamets every time he uses it? And it just very casually uses it twice in this week's episode. Give us your thoughts on sort of all of that, the way that they travel and the way that they deal with the spore drive.
I mean, again, doing the jumps was always a cool part of Discovery, but we had that quandary last season. Like, how do you take this really cool way of travel that we've never seen before and then actually push it to the side in just lieu of just continuous warp travel? I guess we're still waiting to see. I guess Starfleet would eventually decommission it at some point. So I feel like Tilly's efforts to try to come up with some alternative to it may not bear fruit. But I felt like Stamets, his big thing at the end was when he got reunited with his
with Hugh.
With Hugh in the Matrix or
the network.
The network, that helped him.
The Matrix is trademark and copyright.
That's true. We can't. But I feel like that was his big struggle. Once Hugh helped him kind of overcome he had to learn to go with the flow, so to speak. And then I feel like that was the thing, that him resisting was what was killing him. So once he kind of learned that, I think he's able to make these jumps and not at least have a physical toll, but I feel like it's more playing the emotional toll of constantly being reunited with somebody that he can only see in those brief moments.
Yeah, I kind of took it as the spore jumps were damaging or killing him, but after the plan with Lorca in season 1, having them being pushed that far, even mentally, besides this whole physical thing, that 2 jumps is kind of like, okay, great. I think now it'll be more of his willingness to do it, given his own personal storyline this season. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously in season 1 when Lorca had him do, what was it, like 30 jumps as he was determined to try and get over into the mirror universe, that we really saw the impact of that. That was, I think the most difficult on him. It's true they were 2 jumps a few hours apart, but I don't know. I just was surprised to see it. I love the effects and the technology. You get kind of a good laugh moment where Pike has to deal with the fact that there was a jump, and Saru gets a joke. You never forget your first. So.
Waka waka.
Yeah, well, seriously. So in terms of Star Trek Easter eggs and references, we do get a reference to World War III and the fact that there are 600 million people that died during World War III. Now, this is referenced a few times in the original series and in some of the movies, including, I believe, Space Seed. The introduction of Khan is the time that they mention it. But you kind of get that death toll. That's very consistent with First Contact, a film starring Jonathan Frakes, who directed the episode. So I just want to connect it all.
Full circle.
Yeah, exactly. I just wanted to make sure. So it's kind of interesting because you're getting an impression that, Frank, that these are basically like, Mennonites or the Amish or something. At first that was what I thought. We're getting a community that has thrived having shunned technology, when in actuality it's like, oh no, it just broke a long time ago. Talk about your thoughts about the way that our away team interacts with these very religious yet primitive community.
I thought it was interesting, especially because you get to hear a lot about Pike at the beginning of the episode, talking with Burnham about just the contradictory nature of his own father, where he was both a man of science and religion, and so I feel like that's what this episode is just in a nutshell, and you just see that on the ground. One, I liked it because it was just, when was the last time we saw it, especially in Discovery, just an away mission that dealt with the Prime Directive. That was a while since we've heard the Prime Directive.
Or called General Order Number 1 here. It is not, the term Prime Directive they go out of their way to make sure that no one calls it the Prime Directive. I think it's the rules the same. Like, don't interfere. What did you think about sort of the interaction with these people, where it's like, you can talk to them, but we can't interfere in the way that they develop?
I thought it was handled pretty well. Michael is beside herself between understanding the roles of her captain and trying to be in that good path after season 1's insurrection. But deep down inside, she's like, look, guys, it's different, science. And having her deal with that, even to the point where just even following directive when she felt like she wasn't, was tremendous growth. I felt like season 1, Michael would have just put her foot down and had an argument and said, no, we should do this because I feel this way, and to the detriment of the team. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think that season 1, Michael Burnham would pull a gun on the captain, if there was a disagreement on pizza toppings. I think that she was a little bit more jumpy last season. I think she's really evolved a lot. So I definitely agree.
But what I liked about this, though, is that it was certainly Burnham's been kind of our lens that we look through in this series.
Sure.
And I mean, we still have a relationship to play out with Spock that's going to be kind of filtering through the rest of the season. But this could really give us a lot of focus on Pike, who, other than the cage and a little bit of the menagerie, within the original series, or the original context, but I'm stating the J.J. Abrams films. It's the first time we've really got a chance to really dive in and see more about his character.
It's interesting that a character who was created, 53 years ago, we've gotten more backstory on him in these 2 episodes of Discovery than in any of those. If had he been the captain in the original series, from the cage onward, I think we would have gotten a lot out of him. But yeah, there's not really a lot of opportunity for us to see him, and yes, Bruce Greenwood notwithstanding in the J.J. Abrams verse. Right. And I think it's we're getting to really know him, I think, and the nice thing for the Discovery writers, I would say, is that he's essentially a blank canvas. You know where it's going to go. You know what happened, apparently past tense, in the cage, as we established, and you know where it's going in terms of the menagerie. But in between all that, you can kind of do whatever you want. And I'm definitely really enjoying Anson Mount's portrayal of Captain Pike, and I think it gives the series a feel that is much more consistent with the spirit of the original series. I really liked Lorca before we found out what his true end game was, but it was always a different feel in Discovery last year, and I think that I find Pike to be a nice addition. What do you think, Flobo?
I have to agree. I think it's a very special skill to be able to be so affable with your team and still make the direct orders or pull rank if needed, and to do that and still be likable, and then getting a lot of the audience concerns about what that means for the crew, what that means for the team, understanding who's on the team. I'm not sure if that's more of a Pike writing thing or Anson Mount's portrayal of the character, but it's definitely been a net positive in my book.
Frank, are you enjoying this Christopher Pike versus Jeffrey Hunter's, whose Pike we admittedly barely know?
That's right. I mean, it's just nice to. I've been enjoying it, and the thing that I'm wondering if Discovery is going the route of sort of what Flash does with the Professor Wells character, where they kind of basically every season they kind of give him a new character to kind of spin off an alternate version of Wells, because we've seen first season piloted by Captain by Lorca, this season Captain by Pike, and we know he's not going to stick around. He's got to go back to the Enterprise. So it looks like a third season we're going to get a different captain. So
I think we'll get to meet our real captain, who they were apparently heading to Vulcan to pick up their captain. Yeah. So,
but I am enjoying Pike's, how he fits in really nicely with this crew. And I am being prejudiced against a captain I've not even met yet. But
it's true, but I do think he's a nice fit, and I'm definitely enjoying it. We'll talk a little bit more about this episode in a moment, but first, this important message from Mr. Frank Moran.
Me? Christian, you shouldn't have. Yeah. Hey guys, before we move on to our next topic, and trust me, Christian's got plenty of topics for us to cover.
I do.
We just want to say thank you for making us the ESPN TV Talk and for helping us to continue to grow. You know what? We need your help. So if you're on YouTube right now, just hit that thumbs up button and subscribe. And if you're on iTunes, please give us a 5-star rating. But no matter where you are, leave us a comment so you can get involved in the conversation. Being a part of AfterBuzz TV has meant so much to all of us, and we truly appreciate you supporting us and doing what we love. Don't forget to tell your friends and keep enjoying our shows.
Thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
we get a little bit of, there has been a spiritual element to especially this week's episode, but we dealt with it a little bit in last week's premiere. And Burnham's hesitant to tell Pike about for lack of a better description, the angel that she saw. But then she realizes that it's actually relevant. Do you, Flobo, have any thoughts onto what it is that she saw and why that seems to be the same deity or at least being that the people we meet on New Eden are worshiping.
Sure, I really want to think that she does recognize it as an angel, or at least based on her admitted knowledge of religions of the earth. But that is conflicting with her sense of logic, right? Sense of logic. She was injured in the first episode last week. She said she was hallucinating, but there is a kind of an energy there that cannot be addressed or denied. Time will tell whether or not it's not an angel, but I think as far as what she believes right now, that's pretty much a high deity.
What do you think, Frank? Why do you think she didn't want to initially tell Pike about it?
That irritated me, that moment, because I'm like, oh, are we doing this where, again, where somebody's keeping something from somebody else just to milk just put upon drama onto the show?
Yeah.
So I'm very glad at the end of the episode she fessed up and said, oh, no, whether it was her just, learning to trust Pike more as opposed to Lorca and being so secretive and what that thing did. So regardless, I'm glad that she said it. But I did like the conversation between, it's like, I can't call it an angel because I feel like that calling it an angel ascribes certain things that we cannot.
Yeah, exactly what Burnham said. Yeah, but just visually, the way that we would describe it, it's like, well, it's very angelic, So
yeah, and I'm glad that we got to see that video camera from the crew member that was in the church when it first got teleported. So to finally see, like, everybody's on the same page. We all know it's not just having to rely on Burnham's, like, was it hallucinated, was it not, kind of seeing of this entity. We now actually have video proof of its existence.
Through the eyes of Pike. Pike saw it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And the original settlers of New Eden from a couple hundred years earlier did travel there with before warp technology. What theory do you have, Frank, as to how they might have gotten there?
Well, it certainly seems like some teleportation type event. Because, you do see, at least in that video at the end, you see everything just kind of bursting into light around them. So I'm guessing it's something as simple as that.
Could it be something, that works much in the way of the spore drive does?
Very true, yeah, because I don't think it was anything in terms of being any interstellar travel in terms of a ship.
Right.
Because I think that would, even at its highest speeds, unless it was using the spore drive, I don't know. But I think it was something very, very quick.
I agree. I think there had to be something organic, right, quote unquote, compared to what warp drive is, for that to make any sense, at least for me.
Yeah, and in terms of, seeming to be a stickler for General Order 1, we do see at the end of the episode that, jumping ahead for a moment, that Pike does go back there and does explain to Jacob, like, all the things that you wanted to be right are actually right. Oh, by the way, here's like a hypercharged battery. You just knock yourself out. I was a little surprised that he did that because in this episode, and I do like that he is very Kirk-like in that, Kirk was never a stickler for the rules, but that's twice now that one, he disobeys General Order 1, and he's like, oh, I get it. Starfleet doesn't want you to use the spore drive. I think they'd be okay with this. Really? You think they'd be okay? You don't want to check with anyone, make sure that it's all right? You're just going to be like, it's okay. So it's twice that, he kind of takes matters into his own hand. What do you think about that, Flobo, in terms of, Pike, first in terms of actually going back to the planet, General Order had been upheld, and then he's like, let me tinker a little bit.
I had the perfect rebuttal. I was going to be like the movie Dread, with the Carl Urban version, having this guy be a stickler for the rules and then progressing and deciding there's more gray in life. I was with you. Then you all did that first example of using the spore drive, and I was like, yeah, you're right. Why did he do that without conflicting with the Starfleet or anything like that? So I like to say that it's definitely him growing as a captain as well, judging that it's the shades of gray, especially in the Discovery universe. But you do, we'll say over time that will come into question. Yeah,
Frank.
I enjoyed it because, I thought Jacob was a character that we saw him briefly, but just the torture for a man whose entire family preceding him had believed that, like, yes, we came from Earth. It was there was science involved in it. Earth is still existing, not be able to have any way of tangibly proving it. I could almost see the rest of the society always kind of looking at him like he's the odd one. Don't talk to him. And so this man actually finally be that close to actually getting proof. And then what I loved is that Pike goes back down at the end. It just gives that man that peace of mind. And that's all he needed. He didn't ask to well, take me with you. Take me and my family with you. We want to go back. It was just, he wanted that vindication of just knowing, yes, we are not crazy for thinking what we've thought as well. Our beliefs are just as valid as everybody else's beliefs that are on this planet.
So if Pike had left and not gone back, would that not have the same resonance to you? Realizing he put the mission and did the directives that he knew from beforehand? Or?
But I just think for Jacob, he saw them teleport out, which is true. So, it opens a door, but it doesn't give him the definitive answers.
Fair enough.
It's, it almost becomes an act of faith in him at that point. Like, I saw this, I just have to believe that they exist on a starship and they're going around. But to actually, doesn't everybody want proof in some way or shape or fashion? And so to actually have a chance to be given concrete proof that your beliefs are accurate, that was pretty interesting.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and I think if Pike doesn't go back down at the end, you get the impression like, oh, okay, so he's willing to use the spore drive, but he is still a fairly by the book kind of a captain. And instead, we're getting the impression that he plays pretty fast and loose with the rules.
But what I liked it was using science to help power their faith, because the idea is that we just use that power cell to turn on the lights for that church, which they had been using to draw people from all around to help bring them in, nurture, and pass on their faith.
Sure.
Let's talk about Agent Tilly's storyline throughout the course of this episode.
Did you figure out what was going on? Or was it only till the very end that you caught on?
I had a feeling that there was a very Haley Joel Osment feel to May. At first, I was a little baffled by her interaction with May, because I was like, oh, they decided that they wanted to come up with a character who's more annoying than Agent Tilly. And Agent Tilly needs an Agent Tilly who is annoying her. And I'm like, well, this is interesting. And I'm impressed that they kind of went that route. But yeah, you got the feeling that nobody ever saw her except for Tilly. And we'll take a step back from that for a second, because I've really enjoyed, it's just 2 episodes this season, but I've enjoyed her interactions with Stamets. She doesn't want him to leave. She's trying to be like, yeah, aren't you glad you stuck around, buddy? Come on, this is great. Check us out. Here we are having some fun. And she's really determined to try and find a way to use the spore drive without him having to, go into that network, because he doesn't necessarily want to see Hugh again. But then when he goes in and he doesn't see him, he was clearly disappointed by it and didn't want to talk to her. Flobo, talk about sort of some of your thoughts as we watched Tilly and Stamets interact early in this episode.
In my notes, I wrote, Stamets, you sad, bro? She's definitely feeling it. I like the fact they found new situations for Tilly to be her quirky, energetic self without her being like the fresh-faced cadet with the whole training program and all this. With her interaction with May, I was a little bit slower on the uptake to see where she came from. I was like, I wrote so random on my notes. I was like, why is she there? And seeing that progress made me realize, well, it's kind of interesting. This character kind of talks like her, kind of encourages like her, and her background and stuff like that. So to see Tilly go from her heroic scene trying to help out Stamets to even having her own storyline, I'm proud of her. I'm proud of that growth of that character.
Yeah, she really initially in the first season was there for, comedic value, as a little bit of a foil, to irritate Burnham. You only have a character like that as Burnham's roommate because you're like, oh yeah, this is going to be really uncomfortable for her. And I think she's really grown into, a much more well-rounded character. If you think about the end of the first season, when we got to see her imitate her mirror universe version of herself, as Captain Killy, I think we've gotten to see. It must be fun for the actress who plays her, but we've gotten to see kind of a much wider range from Tilly, who, let's not forget, is just a cadet, and she's really getting a lot of interaction with senior officers. And what's the theory, Frank? What do you think happened when she was trying to isolate that specimen and she gets knocked out? What do you think happens then? I mean, do you have a theory for where this manifestation of this girl she went to junior high with, who happens to be dead, what do you think happened? What do you think we're actually seeing, or she's seeing?
I think it may also have to do with the end of last season. She had, when she was in sickbay, she had that green dot go into her at the end of one of the episodes. When
Okay, yeah, I actually didn't remember that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're absolutely right.
So whether that has something to do, because we never really figured out what that had to do with anything yet. So that could be playing into it, or it may be the asteroid sample that they have, a combination of both.
Yeah, I'm wondering if the asteroid sample sort of projected her to, in some way, have her consciousness in the same network that Stamets uses, and that's why she's seeing someone who's not there. It's a lot more consistent and frequent than what Stamets saw. So I think it lends itself to the theory that it's something different. But what are your thoughts on all that, Flobo?
It does seem like a superhero origin story, but yeah, I mean, I will totally play around with that theory if that's like a different kind of astral network. I mean, we're looking at the check right here. Stress VK says Tilly, Spock, Burnham, and Stamets are all seeing dead people, which I thought was pretty.
That's
funny.
a great point. Yeah, that's true. Everybody's seeing somebody that's dead. Yeah.
One thing I don't know if I want to hear any more about, though, is Tilly's fears about the command track program.
Yeah.
Like, that seems way more important to her than it does to me. And so for her to be so anxious, like, so does that mean I'm out of the CTP? Like,
Yeah.
I have no frame of reference to this at all. So I don't care that you're worried. I really don't care.
It's like
Yeah.
Top Gun. I have no idea.
I think we're gonna hear a lot more about it.
Great,
I'm just gonna say,
great.
yeah. Let's spend a whole episode in watching her fill out the paperwork. Yeah,
Can't wait.
it's like, but what's your essay? You know, how do you think you would really represent Starfleet, Tilly?
Fantastic.
Worst spinoff ever. Jeez. Bureaucracy.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting where that's going, and I think it ties directly into, the fact that Stamets saw Hugh and has apprehension about seeing him again. On the one hand, he really wants to see him. And now this will be something interesting, really interesting for Tilly to have to process, presumably next week.
But I thought also that it was such a big thing for Stamets about possibly seeing Hugh while he's doing the sport jump, that the second jump, we get no touch on that whatsoever. Where it's like, oh, maybe they're paying it off in the second jump. He's actually going to see him. But nope. We don't even, it just goes without a hitch. We don't see anything about it.
Yeah.
It just doesn't
He
say.
literally runs off screen. That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
That was it.
He's very upset. Look, he's a very emotional guy. And in terms of one of the themes that we've talked a lot, Frank, going back to last season, is we like when we get some character development from some of the other members of the crew. We did get some nice piloting talk from Lieutenant Detmer. One about doing the space donut, but the fact that she'd also had a pilot's license since she was 12. I'm just like, this is interesting that she's been flying for that long. And look, it's a little thing. It's a bit of a throwaway line, but that is one of the characters that we're starting to get to know a little bit better. Do you appreciate those little touches, even though they're few and far between, Flobo?
Yeah, I think that's always great. I mean, last season we got the reboot with asking everyone on the bridge what their name lent their word was. Even some characters where I couldn't even tell you the name if you put a gun to my head. I feel like they're more like characters now, which is great. But
Yeah.
Detmer too. I know during the season, last season, I was always wondering if they were going to pay off a fight or a showdown with Michael Burnham. That seems to have passed. But in the space of that, knowing more about her and what she likes and what she does that job for, just makes everything a lot more rich and even raises the stakes in certain situations. So
Yeah, same thing with the navigator that went down there as well too with them.
Yes.
Joanne.
Yeah, she's a Luddite,
yeah.
which was cool. And
I thought that was cool. Yeah, that's a great point. We did get something more about her. It's a very recognizable character that hasn't had a lot to do so far. So
she can get him out of a jam right there. She just uses a coat hanger, just pops that lock.
Yeah.
Which I do like that it didn't really deter them that long.
Right.
It would have been great. We're stuck here. How do we possibly get out?
Yeah, exactly. Tune in next week to Star Trek Discovery.
So let us know what you thought of this episode and what some of your expectations are for next week. Flobo and I were kicking around some ideas for just some recurring segments we can have here. Now, we won't necessarily do that every week, but let's go with the idea for who might be, you could consider the MVP of this week's episode. Who gets the gold star in the book this week?
Can I ask Frank first? Because, I want to see his opinion.
Just because I like that he had, even though it was an ensemble episode, we got little touches on everybody, but that we got to see a nice little mini arc for Pike in the episode. So he's my guy this week. I'm loving,
that certainly makes sense. I don't disagree. What did you think,
He's
Flobo?
buying a Pike stock as we speak.
Yes,
I am.
I gotta give it to Tilly. It was ultimately her idea to try the space donut and find a way to extract the team and save the planet. And she's definitely thinking outside the box based on her role. So I'll give her props for her growth.
Delirious, out of sick bay, Tilly, storms onto the bridge. Not in uniform. She's got like scrubs on or whatever. I think that in terms of just an enjoyment factor, I really enjoyed Pike this week, but I think that Tilly went above and beyond. One, putting herself in extreme physical jeopardy in terms of looking out for her friend, Lieutenant Stamets. So, this was a big week for Tilly.
Yeah.
Because I still don't know how I feel. I feel like I'm tired of it, but I want to see what you two think.
Okay.
Are you tired of the old line? Well, you should disagree with my orders more often. I'm like, oh, I don't mind.
I actually liked that her response was like, no, your orders are usually good, sir. And like, that's the way you should respond. Yeah.
I really feel like, and I know it's the story serves it, but Saru, I just feel like is that guy being in passing, right? It's always like, oh, you're the captain. Nah, you're not. Get in the chair. Nah, you're being overruled. So him admitting that felt like, oh my gosh, can you be any much more of a weaker captain in training, or not captain, but lieutenant? And I was like, okay, cool, I get it. I'm kind of done with that one-liner kind of humor, but I feel like we're getting more of that this season. So.
I think that we'll see a little bit more disablement of orders, whether they come from Saru, whether they come from Pike, whether they come from Starfleet. I think we'll get to see a lot more of that. But let us know if you're watching on YouTube or on iTunes, however you're consuming, Spotify, any of the number of ways that you're getting the show. Just give us your thoughts. What have you thought about these first two episodes? We had some interesting comments on last week's episode. Runstent 2001. How much are they paid by CBS to say such BS? Everyone knows Discovery stinks. Albert Kuhn, you three must be getting paid by CBS. Mike Wiles, are you owned or sponsored or supported by CBS? Just asking. None of us is owned or supported by CBS. We just legitimately like the show. However, should CBS want to put us on the payroll, we would be more than happy to continue to talk up Star Trek Discovery. Also, I would like to put it out there, if Disney would like to pay us to badmouth Star Trek Discovery and talk up the upcoming Disney Plus Star Trek live action series that will be premiering later in the year, I am happy to take their money as well. Anyone. My belief system is definitely for sale. I won't speak for Flobo and for Frank, but I also won't keep all the money if the check starts coming in. Look, it's an interesting, I mention it sort of mostly tongue-in-cheek, but there is a narrative out there that Star Trek Discovery is, one, not Star Trek, and two, not very good. And I do think that one of the biggest knocks that people have on it, about it not being Star Trek, is that it's too fast-paced, way too exciting, and the special effects are too good. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, you're right. The old shows aren't any of those things. You know what I mean. They do at times have moments where they're fast-paced. the effects are usually leaving something to be desired. But I find it to be, I said this last season that when we watched the premiere, Frank, exactly what I said. To me, it was the best premiere since Deep Space Nine. So it had been 25 years since I'd seen such a good Star Trek premiere. And, I think there were a couple of bumps along the way, but I'm really enjoying the show throughout the first season, and I like what they're doing this year. So we're not on anybody's payroll. I just don't understand, if you hate the show so much, why you, watch that show, but then spend the extra time to watch us talk about the show. Maybe because you hope we hate it. And look, when we found things to be critical about, and this would have been last season, we do, And Flobo, though, I want you to talk a little bit about how this is really your first foray into the Star Trek universe.
This is absolutely true.
Discovery is what's grabbed you.
Yeah, Discovery is what grabbed you. So when I was a kid, I was between DS9 and Voyager, I believe. I'm a UPN kid, right? I felt that the bus had already left. There was too many Star Trek series for me. Didn't want to get into it. I was traveling abroad where Discovery is available on Netflix for free for streaming. Instantly binged it in a day and a half, and I've been hooked ever since. So this is actually my first foray into Star Trek. I love it. I've been reading more and more about it, and I like it. I love all the characters. I love my man Captain Lorca, even though he's not there anymore, But I am all about it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, obviously, one of the things that you'll find is that Frank and I are talking about Star Trek V so much because it's the best Star Trek movie.
Yes,
Frank,
of course.
Hot take.
Yes, that's it. That's really what we're saying.
Come at me.
Frank, we only have a minute left, but two people who feel the need to be so negative about the show, as in Discovery, and also about us. What do you think motivates somebody like that?
I don't. It's we had certainly our disagreements with the show last season, and the big thing was how are they going to justify everything with what we already know is established canon.
Yeah.
And as a viewer, you could sit there and just hate it for that reason, but it's not going to change. The show is still going to continue to get made, and so if you like Star Trek just in the concept of itself, it's up to you as the individual. If that love of just the concept itself is enough for you to just, to just excuse what it might not have fit into established canon, if that is just your breaking point, I can't help you there. But there were bumps. I agree with Christian that so far this season, it's been on a much better track, and I feel like next episode with the lure of the Klingons, depending on how that handles, because that was one of my least favorite parts of last season. I'm hoping that maybe they kind of figured out what they want, how they want to handle them more going forward. Maybe it's a little bit more of a course correction next episode.
And we'll play a little game, Flobo, that anytime we will all take a shot anytime someone says Takuvma.
Oh, boy.
In any case, we are out of time. We are going to have to beam back up. But thank you for joining us. We'll be back next Thursday at 10 Pacific. And until then, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ChristianDMZ. And amongst the shows you can see me do here at AfterBuzz, Sunday nights I have Marvel TV Weekly at 10. Tuesdays at 4 Pacific, the Trump Report. And Wednesdays and Thursdays next week, we'll be doing a bunch of episodes of The Punisher Season 2. And I am now a regular on the panel over on the Popcorn Talk Network for Marvel Movie News. So there was a lot there. It's just a lot of stuff.
You do
Flobo, where do people find you?
Yeah, Flobito.com. Also on Instagram at Flobito. And right here on AfterBuzz every Sunday, something to wrestle with after show. Check it out Sundays at 4 p.m. Pacific.
And Frank, where do people find you?
Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at HappyGoJackie. Real quick, there was an interview with Jonathan Frakes since he directed this episode, and they also touched on the Picard series for CBS All Access and asked him if he was going to be involved in it, and he said he could not say if he is or is not involved. Would you want to see Riker involved? Let us know.
Yes. That's my quick. You want to talk about hot takes? Right. Yes, I would like to see that. All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody. We will see you next week. Until then, live long and prosper.
Our founder, Kevin Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.